In 2023, about 27 million US kids between the ages of 6 and 17 participated in organized sports. Yet, by the age of 13, 70% of those athletes have quit sport altogether. It shouldn't be this way. Our children deserve to experience the transformative power of sport and the lifelong benefits that come from sport participation, physical activity, and being part of a team. But the current recipe that we're using for youth sports in our community and around the country doesn't produce the outcomes our children deserve because it's missing one key ingredient. And speaking of recipes and ingredients, I need to tell you guys a secret. I think my wife makes the world's best chocolate chip cookies. No, I'm serious. I actually think they're the best. Just the other month, a friend told her, and I quote, "These are already grandma-level cookies." She just turned 29. But seriously, her recipe and her process are fantastic, and the results are beautiful and delicious. But if tonight she decided to make those cookies and she left out one of the key ingredients, say the flour or the butter or the sugar, or she skipped a step in her process like refrigerating the dough, the results would be less than desirable. And when 7 out of 10 kids are dropping out of sport by the age of 13, there's gotta be something wrong with our recipe. Because all those children are dropping out of sport and they're missing out on what research has shown are the lifelong benefits of sport participation. You see, children who participate in sports show higher levels of lifelong physical activity. They do better in school, they go to college at higher rates, they build stronger relationships with their peers and have stronger ties to their community. They even earn more and are more productive as adults. But that's not where the benefits stop. Children who participate in sports also show decreases in these areas: stress, anxiety and depression, risk of suicide and substance abuse, and school dropout rates. If we want our children to experience the lifelong benefits of sport participation, then we need to add back into the recipe the missing ingredient: fun. That's right, fun. The number one reason youth athletes stop playing sports is because it's no longer fun. Just think about that for a minute. A child stops playing a game because it's not fun. If we want to keep kids in the game and allow them to experience the lifelong benefits of sport participation, there's 3 keys to adding fun back into the youth sports recipe. The first is creating developmentally appropriate sport experiences. Too often, the games and sport activities that we're putting our children in have not been appropriately scaled to fit their age and stage. The format, rules, and equipment being used don't fit the age and stage of the athlete, and thus it creates an experience where it's much too difficult for those young athletes to experience levels of success that are enjoyable. Let's just talk about the sport of basketball for a minute. In our community and around the country, most leagues and tournaments put 3rd graders, usually a 9-year-old, on a 10-foot hoop playing 5-on-5 on a full-size high school basketball court. That's the same game an 18-year-old is playing. Could you imagine for just a second if our schools and teachers decided that 3rd grade students were going to be required to read a senior-level novel like The Great Gatsby? We'd know that that's crazy. That level of challenge is beyond what most 3rd graders can handle in the classroom. But for some reason, when we decide a 3rd grade athlete is going to play the same game as an 18-year-old, we don't bat an eye, even though it becomes much too difficult for those youth athletes to experience levels of success that are enjoyable and thus motivate them to stay in the sport. And the top organizations in our country know that things need to change. USA Basketball, for example, recommends that 7- and 8-year-olds play on 8-foot hoops with smaller balls and smaller courts, and that 9-, 10-, and 11-year-olds, until about 5th grade, that they play on 9-foot hoops and smaller courts. But you'll be hard-pressed to find a league or a tournament in our community or around the country that follows those guidelines for athletes above the age of 8. It's usually expensive and inconvenient, or as the adults, we erroneously believe that kids need to learn to play how adults play it, so we put them in experiences that just don't fit. USA Hockey wanted to drive home this point, so they actually conducted an experiment with a group of adults. They took a group of adults, and they wanted to show them what it's like when we put children in an adult-sized game. See that white hockey rink there in the middle is the size of an adult-sized hockey rink. And that blue hockey rink is the size of the hockey rink they put these adults on for a game. It was scaled proportionately to be similar to what a child experiences when we put them in adult-sized games. So they had a group of adults play hockey on this giant rink, and after the game, they interviewed them. They got their feedback. And the core of the feedback from these adults was this: it wasn't very fun. They reported that the experience didn't fit them, that you were often too far away from the play, that if you made one mistake, you were all of a sudden out of the play. And it was too hard to even block shots because the net was too big. At its core, sport isn't fun even for adults when the experience doesn't fit them. And the benefits of scaling sport for children have been widely documented. When we scale sports for kids, it leads to higher levels of task success, which builds higher levels of self-efficacy or confidence, and leads to higher levels of enjoyment. It's more fun for kids when sports fit them. The second key to adding fun back into youth sports is training coaches. Of the 6.5 million youth coaches in our country, less than 1 in 5 have been trained in effective motivational techniques or how to communicate well with kids, and only 1 in 3 have been trained in sports skills or tactics. And before we get into some of the issues with all of the untrained coaches that are serving our children, I want to make this clear. I think the vast majority of youth coaches are doing the best they can with what they know. They're often incredibly selfless and caring people. But we'd never allow those stats for our children in the classroom if 1 in 5 teachers were trained in child development or classroom management, and only 1 in 3 were trained in their content areas. But for some reason, we've decided it's acceptable for children in sports. But it's a major factor in the attrition rates and why so many kids continue to drop out and miss out on the lifelong benefits of sport participation. There's actually a research study conducted that looked at attrition rates for athletes who played for a trained coach versus those who played for an untrained coach. The study found that only 5% of athletes who played for a trained coach quit the sport the following year. On the other hand, 26% of athletes who played for an untrained coach quit the sport the following year. 26%. If we want to put fun back into youth sports, we have to train our coaches and hold them to high standards. And I'm not just talking about training coaches in the X's and O's or techniques and tactics of their sport. Those things are important, but there's a lot more to coaching and leading than just that. I had a chance to interview Coach Jason Watson. He's the University of Arkansas women's volleyball coach a few years ago. And in our conversation, he boiled their coaching philosophy down to 2 phrases that have stuck with me to this day. He said they wanted to be good to and good for every athlete in their care. Good to in the way that they treated and led every athlete. Good for in the way that they helped every athlete grow as a player and a person. We need more coaches that understand those 2 core ideas, being both good to and good for every athlete in their care. Because when we neglect to train coaches and hold them to high standards for the sake of the athletes, we leave the athlete experience up to the luck of the draw of which coach they get placed with. And hopefully, they don't get placed with a coach like my friend Nick had on his 8th grade basketball team. Nick was headed to basketball practice one morning his 8th grade school year. And at practice, he and his teammates were competing in a one-on-one competition. Their coach was refereeing, and Nick was engaged in a rep. Nick's coach made a call that he disagreed with, and out of frustration, a 13-year-old boy turned to a grown man and said, "I think you need to get your glasses checked." Nick's coach proceeded to grab him around the neck, pin him up against the cinder block wall, and verbally berate him. 25 minutes later, Nick has to head to class, and he has an anxiety attack after an adult had abused him. This is obviously the worst end of the coaching spectrum. And something that no child in any context should ever experience. But if we don't train coaches and hold them to high standards, too many athletes experience abuse or damaging psychological things like bullying, manipulation, or favoritism at the hands of coaches. But on the other hand, if we're willing to train coaches and hold them to high standards for the sake of the athletes, they have the chance to change the lives of the children they lead. Like my high school soccer and soccer and basketball coach, Coach Chug. When I was a freshman in high school, he called me over to sit down next to him on a bench during soccer practice. And he proceeded to give me a vision for the kind of player I could become, how I could help the team, and the role that I could grow into. It motivated me and it inspired me. Over the next 4 years, Coach Chug was there every day, full of love, challenge, support, and usually a dose of humor. We knew our goal was to win games, but we also knew his purpose was a lot deeper than that. He was there to grow us as players and people. And we won at a high level in the process of that. And I mentioned that his practices were fun. We showed up every day knowing we were going to have a chance to compete and play the game that we love, not stand in long lines doing boring drills that wouldn't transfer to the competition and help us get better. And that vision that he cast for me as a freshman on that bench, it came to life my senior year when I was playing that exact role that he told me I could as a freshman. See, I gave him my best at every practice and every game because I knew that he had my best interest at heart. He was both good to and good for me. It changed my life, and it's a huge reason that I do the work I do now, serving youth athletes. See, we need a lot more coaches like Coach Chug and a lot less like my friend Nick experienced. If we want to keep kids in the game and give them fun experiences, we've got to invest the time and resources into training coaches and holding them to high standards. The final key to putting fun back into youth sports is redefining success. Too often in youth sports, wins and losses have become the primary metric of success for parents, players, organizations, and coaches. But when that's the primary barometer for success at the youth level, we create an environment that doesn't serve the long-term growth and development of these athletes and fills the environment with a level of pressure that youth athletes should not have to experience. We all need to remember this. They're not professionals. They're children. And it's worth recognizing that as they get older and they hit those junior high and high school years, it becomes more competitive. Winning and losing becomes more important, and that's okay. And I'm not saying we shouldn't try to compete and win. We should. There's value in that. But especially at the youngest levels, it should not be the primary focus. And even as they get older, it shouldn't be the only focus. Success has got to be about more than winning and losing. It's got to be about their growth as people and players, emotionally, physically, and socially. There's a lot more to youth sports than just winning and losing. Because when coaches are so focused on wins and losses, especially at those youngest levels, it leads them to make short-sighted decisions that too often create negative experiences for athletes. It's exactly what happened to my friend Josh on our third grade baseball team. It was our first year in kid pitch, so now the kids are pitching to each other instead of the coaches. And Josh was already about a foot taller than his peers. Like a lot of tall, young athletes, he wasn't very coordinated yet. He'd expressed a desire to pitch to our coaches that season, and they told him he would get the chance, but the season came and went, and he never really got a meaningful opportunity. Unsurprisingly, he quits the sport the next season. He goes on to grow to be about 6'4" and 220 pounds, the ideal body frame for a pitcher. But because he didn't give us the best chance to win as third graders, he wasn't given the opportunities he needed to develop and fall in love with the game. That's just one small example of how a short-sighted mindset focused on winning and losing at the youth level can create negative experiences for athletes. The other key change that we need to make when we talk about success for youth athletes is looking at where their journey is likely to end. You see, roughly 2 in 10 parents think their child could play Division I sports, and 1 in 10 think their child could make it to the pros or the Olympics. But stats from an NCAA study looking at outcomes for high school athletes paint a very different picture about where most children's journey will end. See, only 1 in 610 will play in the MLB, 1 in 3,960 in the NFL, 1 in 10,399 in the NBA, and 1 in 12,873 in the WNBA. But just because most children's journey won't end in college or the pros doesn't mean we should be content with the current attrition rates, because those children dropping out are missing out on so many of the lifelong benefits of sport participation. We do need to have some honest conversations, though, in light of the data to determine how can we offer the best experience possible to as many athletes as possible for as long as possible. Success in youth sports is about more than winning and losing. It's about keeping them in the game and allowing them to experience all the lifelong benefits of sport participation. So to wrap things up, what can we do about it? Well, if you're a parent, I'd encourage you to look for organizations that scale sports, train their coaches, and are clear on what success looks like. If you're an organization or a decision maker, scale your sports, even if it's inconvenient or costly. Train your coaches and be clear on success. And if you're a coach, make it your goal to never be a child's last coach. Be good to and good for every athlete in your care. If we want to keep kids in the game, it's on us as adults to advocate for and create sport experiences for children that are at their core fun. Thank you.